computer and try that. All right. Hey, well, welcome class members. This is Ken Summers, and my guest today is Andrea Nelson with the Daniels Fund. She is a grants program director. Did I get it right, Andrea?
Officer.
Officer. I was going to say coordinator, officer, director, officer. Anyway, she's a big deal at the Daniels Fund. I'll just put it that way. No.
You're too kind.
Andrea's been with the Daniels Fund for 20 years, I found out. And actually, many of you are outside of the state of Colorado, but here in Colorado, the Daniels Fund is probably what I consider the premier foundation, in the state. I'm not sure if that's really true relative to the assets that they have, available, but certainly in terms of the work they do, their history, their just profile in the state of Colorado, I'd say is unsurpassed. They do a lot with. They have actually 7 funding areas. Andrea, why don't you, in terms of an overview of the Daniels Fund, just give us an idea of those 7 funding areas.
Yeah, and actually we have 8.
8, okay.
8 funding areas. Yeah, I'm happy to. First of all, let me back up. Our foundation is based on Mr. Daniels, Mr. Bill Daniels, who was a pioneer in the cable tech industry, and that is how he made his funding, his dollars that came to the Daniels Fund when he passed away. We have, I want to say, about 1.5 billion in assets. Our main mission is to follow his intent. 30% of our funding goes to our scholarship program, and 70% is allocated to our grant program. Within our grants, we have the 8 funding areas: aging, alcohol and drug addiction. Sorry, they're kind of like the 7 dwarves, so I was going to have to remember what exactly they are, but aging, alcohol and drug addiction, disabilities, early childhood education, K through 12 education reform, homelessness and disadvantaged, youth development, and amateur sports. So
all right,
those are kind of our main areas.
Yeah, so some great areas, and you can tell that a lot of those focus on education, child and youth, development, and as always with foundations, especially those that are established by by an individual, they will carry that person's priorities in life. And many of you know that I served as the executive director of a residential drug and alcohol recovery program, and that happens to be one of the areas of focus of the Daniels Fund because of Bill Daniels' interest in addressing that issue. I'm not sure if we submitted any grant proposals to the Daniels Fund. I know we didn't get any funding, so that's all right though. Hey, Andrea, let's talk about grants for the benefit of our students here. In a very broad term, how would you describe the role and function of grants in a nonprofit? Maybe what, I don't know, when you think of grants, just in the broadest term, what is a grant? What's its purpose? How should they be viewed? I hope that's not too nebulous.
Yeah, hopefully I'm going to answer your question the way you'd like. I look at it as, and certainly for us, it's an opportunity for us to provide a charitable donation to an organization based on what our donor said to do with the dollars. So I think grants is just a function of that there have been individuals in foundations, they might be family foundations, private foundations, etc., who have passed away or are still living that have set aside dollars and want to provide some philanthropy to organizations and nonprofits. So.
Yeah. And so, yeah, a key part of it, I think, for the class to understand is that, grants are a part of matching the passion and interest of a foundation or of maybe specific donors that have a fund with a foundation like the Daniels Fund, to the mission of a nonprofit. And so, so with that the case, it seems like, most grants are very program specific. Isn't that correct, Andrea? There's a specific program that's being proposed, or the expansion, or a need that is being presented.
Absolutely. No, I think from the grantee's perspective, you're spot on that they need help with, maybe it's general operating, maybe it's a specific project or program, or it could be a capital need. From our standpoint, within our 4 areas, we have a target and a focus, like early childhood. For our early childhood education, for example, our North Star for that is kindergarten readiness. So any proposal that we receive, I mean, it's very important to do, as a grantee, your own due diligence around what is it that fund wants? What's their North Star? What's their goal? Because we're looking to fund and provide grants that fit with our goals and our metrics as well. So I think that alignment is incredibly important.
Yeah. Hey, how many, I guess a key question is, how many grants, what is the percentage of grants that are awarded out of the applications that are received? And what's an average amount of a grant?
Yeah, great. I would say, I think the last I saw this last year, and I hope I got this data around, I want to say we give maybe somewhere between 225 and 250 grants each year. They can range in size from maybe it's 20,000 up to millions. It just kind of depends on what the particular project is, the alignment with our donor intent, etc. So there's that. And then let's see, you had asked one other question. I'm trying to remember.
Well, I guess one of the things I wanted to, the grant writing process is very competitive. And
Yes.
So 200, 225 grants that are given out of probably 1,000 applications, maybe more, I don't know.
Yeah, great. Okay, that was the piece I was going to mention. So Daniels Fund, I want to say maybe 4 or 5 years ago, instead of entertaining every single application, we have kind of shifted to kind of have an inquiry process. And that can look at a bunch of different ways. It can be an email to me like, hey, can we set up some time because I have this project and I'd really like to discuss it and I believe it fits with blah, 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 blah. And so in that discussion, that process, we try to save the grantee or grant seeker some just effort and time in terms of, if it's going to be a decline, let's let you know now so you're not wasting any more time, trying to get funding from the grant, from the Daniels Fund, and you can move to Coors or one of the other foundations in town. So based on that, right now, our percent of approvals, I'm going to say the board is awarding, maybe 97% go through and they're approved. It's very rare that one, or it's just something that's philosophically they don't agree with, or sometimes because our board are very high level, amazing, smart individuals that have networks and connections. Sometimes they know about things that we just don't know because they're having meetings with the CEOs and companies and know some of the behind the scenes information.
Yeah, no, that's good. And that's an important aspect of the Daniels Fund. And you kind of answered an important question as well that I even had in mind, since the Daniels Foundation is a foundation that does not just accept unsolicited grants. It's kind of like, well, how do you get a grant requested? And Andrea kind of, I don't mean kind of, she answered that in terms of it does take, a phone call, beginning to build relationships, beginning to find out if there's an interest. Maybe that's a short process, maybe it's a longer process. Maybe somebody like Andrew or one of the program directors would want to do a tour of a facility to get an idea of what the project is. So that's helpful to know in terms of, okay, if a foundation, the foundation only accepts requested applications, how do I get them to request it? Now, is that kind of process pretty much the same across different foundations, you think, Andrea, in terms of just maybe, reaching out and having that visit with a program director or an officer?
Yeah, I'm not really sure if I can answer that on behalf of other foundations. I know for us, Mr. Daniels, our founder, was very concerned about relationships and wanted to make sure that we were, and as his steward, I have to make sure that I'm reaching out in the community and a good, making those kinds of relationships with organizations and grantees. And I think to get the application started, it just kind of depends on, one, the fit with our strategies within our funding areas. Two, there's many times that I begin talking to somebody, but their project is maybe a little half-baked. It just needs more time, because some of it, I don't want to take it forward to our board unless it has the best chance for success. So that there are a lot of different factors that kind of vary. But if it is got the best chance for success, it fits well, and there's some just criteria like that, then I may go ahead and invite an application at that point, at which point that doesn't necessarily guarantee funding. And I think that's very important to note, because there's still a whole back end due diligence process that needs to happen. There's a review of financial information. There is a review of, how are you operating? What is this, what does this look like? Is there a financial need? Nonprofit is an IRS designation. It is not a business model.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, and with all that, are there some characteristics, I think I'm using the right word, of successful grant applications? I mean, is it based on the stability of funding sources outside of the grant? Is it based on how long the organization's been in existence? Outside of just maybe a potential match of the mission and programs of the nonprofit with what the Daniel Fund funds, what are some of the other criteria that makes a grant application successful?
Yeah, great question. I think a lot of it can be just their case for support. I think sometimes it's important to kind of discuss, here's the need for it. Here's what we're going to do with the dough. I think that's incredibly important. Money to do what? What do you want to do with the dollars? Is it to operate? Is it to expand? Is it to support? I think that is a key piece. And I think it's also important to really kind of get into the nuts and bolts. What are you doing? How are you doing it? And what success are you having? I want to say pretty much, we also don't support everything that does fit, to your point. It has to be, like, to use our drug and alcohol addiction funding area, we have benchmarks. We want to see you here. It has to be a clean facility that you're operating. It has to be, something that you'd want to send a family member there. You wouldn't. Yeah. So a lot of stuff in that background too. And some of that is a little beyond just the application, but I think that case for support really makes is important as well.
Yeah, that's, and class members, Andrew just referenced in terminology some things that are in a typical, logic model. What are you doing? How are you doing it? What are going to be the results? What kind of resources does it take? What are the outcomes, the outputs and the outcomes that are going to result from that? One of the things in this class that we work on is a logic model. Now, is that something that would be submitted as part of a grant application, or is that just a useful tool to help structure the narrative of the application?
I would say, I think that would be an incredible attachment to add to our application, just because it's how important for us to know, well, how is an organization thinking about its success, and how is it tracking metrics, and how is it moving? And I mean, there's a lot of different stages we support organizations too. I mean, there's startups we look at too. There's expansion or replication type things. And then there's some that have been around for a really long time and they're doing things incredibly well. I'll use an organization we're funding up in Wyoming called Climb, and they are tracking 2 years out. They provide employment for low-income single mothers to teach them the skills and working with industry. And they're tracking 2 years after program conclusion, how many are the decrease in food stamp usage. So, I mean, to me, that is incredibly important. It shows their success that they're doing that. Hope that is helpful.
No, that's that's good. Good comments to help show that foundations really are wanting to invest in programs that are successful, that are going to have good good outcomes, and the money's being leveraged in a very positive way. Besides the areas of interest, and one of the things, the Daniels Fund, each foundation tends to have a geographic area. I mean, probably I'd say more rare for there to be funding from a foundation that is nationwide. Most foundations have a geographical area. So many of you are from, Florida or Georgia, or, the East Coast or the West Coast, or the middle part of the country. So Andrew, we have students from all over the United States. It's kind of exciting. But the Daniels Fund, for example, headquartered in Denver, serves Colorado, Wyoming, New Mexico, and Utah. And so they actually have a 4-state region, which actually is pretty generous. I have a friend of mine in northern Colorado who is involved in a private foundation, and they only do like a couple of counties in northern Colorado is their funding area. Mm-hmm. And so, so when you do your research for foundations, that's there's probably 2 basic questions. Number one, is there a match with the mission of my nonprofit or the program I'm proposing and this foundation? And number 2, do they fund in my area, my geographic area? And you have to know those things even to, kind of get out of the chute or get on the horse to get out of the chute. But so anyway, some good points, there. Hey, maybe for this session, we'll try to keep it a little bit shorter, but Andrea, personally, I've always been interested in donor-advised funds. You kind of made reference to that because the Daniels Fund and many foundations you'll find, and community foundations are especially like this. Foundations, besides having funds that are put there by an individual or a group or however it may be. I was mentioning with Andrea in Colorado, there's the Rose Community Foundation that was actually funded through the sale of a hospital facility many years ago. But in addition to that initial funding source, then many foundations will serve as an administrator for individuals who don't want to set up their own foundation, but they want to set aside an amount of money. It may not be, I don't know, Andrea, what is the maybe smallest, largest donor advised fund in terms of dollars?
Well, Daniels Fund are just because we were based on the dollars that Mr. Daniels had. He had about $1 billion when he passed away. So all of those assets transferred to the Daniels Fund. So we don't actually have donor advised funds.
Okay.
But the Denver Foundation, I apologize with your your class being from so many different places, but most of what I know is in the Colorado area. But the Denver Foundation is a community foundation, and part of their assets are donor advised funds. So, and I don't know how many are in their portfolio, but I want to say, maybe a couple hundred of philanthropists that have given dollars specifically for different things. It might be, scholarship dollars for to go to a specific school in Colorado. It may be we have an interest in health or the arts or etc. But they're a great example.
Yeah, okay. And I know the Rose Foundation, again, they're more of a community foundation. I think they have over maybe 100, 125 donor advised funds. Andrea, I'm not sure if you could help, since the Daniels Fund doesn't have a portfolio of donor advised funds. I don't know if you could answer this question or if you know, what's the process of grants being dispersed from a donor advised fund? Is it, are you familiar with that process by any chance?
I am not. I don't know. I don't know if I should speak to it and then say something.
Yeah, well, no, and that's and that's fine. If the Daniels Fund had those, you would know. I'll try to maybe connect with the community foundation and find out more about that, because that always seemed like a good, potential for some, grant dollars being given. I have actually the physical therapist that I've been seeing, interesting enough, his family has a foundation, and I don't know if they run it themselves or they run it through a community foundation or not, but it's interesting. It's been around a couple of generations, I believe, and it's very specific to helping with textiles and clothing education or arts in universities.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes those interests can be almost pinpoint. I mean, they can be very, very narrow,
Mm-hmm.
but if you happen to have a nonprofit whose mission, or an educational institution who's interested in that area, then it creates a good fit. And he mentioned that his I think his father in their work says, it's interesting sometimes how hard it is to give away money,
Right.
But that's probably because, again, trying to match that very specific
Mm-hmm.
area. It's not a matter of just willy-nilly, hey, here's money, go have fun.
Mm-hmm.
Like you say, there's a fiduciary responsibility that all of these employees and staff members of the Daniels Fund has to Mr. Daniels to not just carry out what they want, but to be mindful of what he wants and the principles
Mm-hmm.
that he established.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's kind of true of many foundations. Well, hey, Andrea, I will not keep you, any longer, because I appreciate your time and want to honor that. And there may be some other questions that arise during this class. Maybe I'll send you an email if there are questions you could, help out on. And we wish you and the Daniels Fund all the best. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, and happy to help in any way that I can, and just so appreciate your time today. And thank you.